Good morning. Good morning, Simon. Nice to see you. Good morning, Charlotte. Nice to be tuning in. Hi, Robert. Good morning to you. Hi, Ian. All well? Oh, the course does look gorgeous, Simon. It's logical, but it's because I've never seen it happen before. Good morning, Helen. Are you okay? Inside for what? It's logical that a golf course self-repairs, but I've never seen it happen before. So I've never been at a golf course which has been closed for so long. But it's just all knitted together. And interestingly, on one of my early videos that I did outside on the first tee, a lady member wrote in and said, "God, look at all the divots on the first tee, and they've been sanded, and so they really stood out on the video." And there's a few on there from general use, and they stood out against the dark green of the grass. The first tee is like a carpet now, so it's amazing how quickly they do get back in shape. But it looks absolutely fabulous. One member did ask me if I'm going out playing 18 holes every day. I'm not telling you, but I'm definitely not. I can assure you of that. Okay, we'll give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll get started. Alrighty, what time is it now? 4 minutes past. But 1 more minute, and then we'll get started. We're going to talk today about. I'm going to pick some of the stats from the tour of the players, and then look at how those stats are used in their game. And I'm going to. Hi, George. Very good morning to you. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about two very distinctly different players' swings. I'm going to go into deep analysis of that. What works for everybody doesn't work for. What works for some doesn't work for everybody. Alrighty, 1 more minute, and then we'll go. Alrighty. Well, a very good morning to all of you. Hope you had a nice VE Day celebration yesterday. I went to my local British Legion to go and do the 2-minute silence in the high street there. There's about 20 people stood there. But then come the party in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, it was like 500 people in our street went out. So there we go. We're going to talk a bit about stats today. So I'm going to start off with the stats of Rory McIlroy. And I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. And he averages a scoring average of 68.4 every round. Think of that, 68.4. Now, these are on championship golf courses. If he was a club golfer, that would be something more like 64, 65. And he'd be playing on something like a +7 handicap. The average on the tour is 71.2. So he's gaining, what, 2.8 shots every single round. That's nearly sort of 12 shots, 3 shots around. Yeah, 12 shots over the course of a tournament between that and the average score. So an incredible player there. Now, interestingly, in his driving distance, he's second in the world, but only by 1 yard. So he's obviously long. He is 180th in the world at driving accuracy. Think about the 180th in the world. So 179 tour professionals are better than Rory McIlroy off the tee. Greens and regulation is at 18th, which is pretty good given how many fairways he misses. And I want to come to that later on. The sequence of how we hit more greens is by hitting more fairways. He's second in the world for amount of eagles, 12th for birdies, scoring average #1. So think of that. He's not the best in any category. And he, in fact, is way beyond the average well, he's worse than the average in some categories, but he's still the world #1. So he puts it all together and makes a score. And it also shows what he puts, morning Brian, what he puts a premium on in his game. Now, elite level, performance level like that, they need to hit the ball absolutely as far as possible. I've said this before to you, that the longest hitters in the world are earning 2 or 3 times as many dollars as the straightest hitters in the world. Alrighty, so if we look at who's the longest driver in the world right now, it is actually Bryson Dechambeau. And if I show you here, this is a picture of him showing off with Nick Faldo recently, and the circle, or the oval around the number there, 201, is the speed of the ball. Now, he's hit that ball on a speed of 201. The average on tour is 167. So a full 34 miles an hour faster there with the ball speed. Now, a ball that's traveling very quickly, travels straighter, travels further, for obvious reasons. Get a square strike at the back of the ball, it can't be oblique in any way. But he's got himself up to 201 now. So how's he done it? Well, that was him 2 years ago. Fit, athletic guy. And over the winter, he has become that. And he's absolutely been pumping the weights, pumping the iron to get himself to be as strong as possible. He's comfortably driving 350 when he's swinging now. But he's got himself so big now and so stocky. And I'm going to look at his swing in a bit of detail today and compare it against Jim Furyk, because Jim Furyk leads at the moment in fairways and greens hit. And this guy, this monster now, who's put on a couple of stone in weight, is the longest hitter. So if we then look at Furyk now is hitting 80.38% of fairways against an average of 60.39. So think of that. The average fairways hit is 60. He's hitting 80%, and that's remarkable. What a difference he is between that and the average. His greens hit in regulation is 76.3 against an average of 66.3. So what it tells you there is much easier to hit a green if you're hitting a fairway. So what Furyk does, he puts a premium on square solid contact, not on distance. And we'll see a huge difference in the two swings when I analyse them very shortly. So you put a square distance, so he's hitting fairways. He then hits more greens. The more greens you hit, the fewer putts you're going to take. Because the fewer chips you'll need because you're not missing greens to put less stress on your game. So let's have a good look now. In fact, just to emphasise that point there, if Rory McIlroy was to hit your drives, or was to hit a 30 handicapper's drive or a scratch golfer's drives, he would save them twice as many shots by hitting the tee shots than he would do by hitting their iron shots, or by hitting their chips, or by doing their putting. The reason being they're so long and so accurate that if let's say McIlroy hits the ball 320, he's going to drive the first green. He's going to leave you with a short iron into the second green. He's going to leave you with a chip into the third. He'll drive 4, 5, 6, 7. He'll leave you with a very short club into 8. You've got a good chance of hitting the ninth green in 2, and so on and so forth. So the longer you are, the straighter you are, the longer and straighter you are, the more greens you're going to hit anyway, because there's less pressure on your game. Now, if we first of all look at the big difference here, this is how Furyk sets up. This is how Dechambeau sets up the ball, and we're going to talk today about his technique, which is called a single plane swing. And then Furyk sets up the ball like this, and he uses a much more conventional, believe it or not, a much more conventional swing. So the big difference between their setups there are that Furyk brings his arms down in front of him, he hangs his arms, and the club shaft sets at an angle to those arms. Whereas Dechambeau has his hands much higher and he's trying to swing the club what he thinks is around on a single plane swing. So let me just demonstrate that to you. So if I set myself up to the ball here, Furyk sets up a little more conventionally because he sets an angle between the glove arm and the shaft of the club, and that then creates a lever, leveraging his swing. Dechambeau sets the shaft of the club in his arms almost in a straight line, and he doesn't want that lever. So what he does, he swings on a single plane. So the club swings around on this plane here, all the way around his body from this starting position, not from this starting position. So first of all, let's look at what swing plane is. If I go to the Trackman computer over here, I've hit a drive here, a reasonable one, 275, bit slow. My club path 5.5 to the inside, and my swing plane there is 47.6 degrees. And just to give you what Trackman says swing plane is, swing plane is the vertical angle between the ground and the circle or the arc that the club head travels on during the bottom portion of the swing. So let me just read that to you again. Swing plane is the vertical angle between the ground and the circle or the arc that the club head travels on during the bottom portion of the swing. Now, how I describe swing plane is I say, look, it's the angle around the body the sweet spot rotates. So that's my swing plane there. And I'm measuring just the sweet spot because that's what we hit the ball with. If we have a hammer and a nail, we hit the hammer into the top of the nail with the head of the hammer. We don't hit it with the shaft or the handle. It's the same in a golf swing. So the rotational axis of that club swings around my body. Upright swing plane, flat swing plane. So if we look at Dechambeau first of all, he says he puts his hands so high because he wants to swing on a single plane around the body here. And if we get to the top of his swing here, you can see that his glove arm is almost pointing down to the ball. So he's kind of achieved what he thinks he's achieving there. I'm not arguing with him at all. I'm just saying that if you look at the pictures here, then it isn't quite a single plane as he feels it is, even though he's trying to do that. Now, if we go to Furyk's swing, who currently is the straightest, most accurate driver and fairway and greens hitter, look at that. So he's set his arms and hands very low, created a huge angle. Now, if we think the difference between Dechambeau, the club head would run all the way through his arms up here, Furyk doesn't. Now, he has a very soft posture, and I've talked about that before. Soft postures are good. It means the body will have more range. If you try to get into this very false, stiff back posture, it might look good on camera that it's sort of super rigid, but who wants to be rigid in a swing? You want movement, flow, and mobility in a swing. You don't want stiffness. So there he is, all loose, hands very close to his body. Next picture, nothing too unusual there. Now it starts looking a little bit stranger than the other tour pros. Everything looks a little bit gummed up. And the famous phrase about Furyk is that he could swing his club in a phone box. Everything looks a little bit narrow there. So if we talk about how to create real power, I'm not saying he doesn't create power, but how to create more power, we want the widest arc possible. But Furyk's all about hitting fairways and greens, so he doesn't bother about having the widest arc possible. He has the tidiest arc for his game. Now, Charlotte, who I've taught from a beginner, hopefully you're still online, Charlotte, who is now an 11 handicapper, when Charlotte swings, she bends that left arm, therefore she narrows the arc a little bit. But she hits the ball powerfully because she actually uses that narrowing of the arc as an extra lever anyway. So by the time she comes down and hits the ball, the arc is wide down here. There's loads of examples of good players who bend that left arm a little bit. It's not the worst thing in the world to bend there because as long as it straightens on the way down. Furyk takes the view that his narrow swing works for him and he hits the ball straighter. So his game doesn't rely on being a bomber. If we then go to the next picture along here, this is where things start getting really interesting with Furyk. Let me get that picture up for you. Is that club now is very, very vertical, very high. And then he gets very high up here. Now, in terms of reference points there for how high he is, if you look where his hands are, where the club head is, just seen your message, Charlotte, his club head's above his head. Now, that's an upright swing, all right. Now, if I take a swing here, Jack Nicklaus was upright, and his hands were over the sort of top part of his shoulder. He never put the club head above his head. So Furyk goes very high up here. And this is where we start into some really interesting sort of three-dimensional understanding of the swing. Because what he does next is he takes that club behind his shoulder. Above his head, behind his shoulder. And what he's done there, because remember, he relies on his arc of his swing and his levers to create power. So he relies on the levers of his swing, not his arc. But what he's doing there is if the club head travels back from here, let's say it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 foot. If it's traveled back 18 foot and he does that, he's added 4 foot to the length of his arc. So the length of his swing now has just increased by 4 foot, and that gives him 4 foot of extra power, momentum, and speed. So it's a very clever way that the pro like Furyk increases his arc three-dimensionally, rather than when we look at him here, and we see he's a little bit bent here and a bit narrow. So he might look a little bit narrow in his arc there, but on this angle, looking down from here, he increases the length of it, the width of his swing, the length of his swing, I beg your pardon, by 4 foot to come down now into the classic sort of position we always... I didn't lose a signal here, Simon. Maybe it was your signal. So he's gone up to the top here, very high. And as he comes down, he shallows the club. And now he's in an absolute classic hitting position there. So all that sort of looping that he'd done, all the shape of his swing where he starts hands close here, picks the club up above his head, and then loops back here, brings him down to quite an orthodox hitting position. Orthodox hitting position, for measured by all the pros, is on the halfway down position here, just before they make the contact. The hands are just in front of the feet. The club shaft is behind them. It's not above them. It's behind them here, in that angle there. And one of my favourite photographs to show you, again, just look at that picture there. The club shaft is almost going through his back forearm here. If I go to one of my favourite photographs, which I show you regularly, because ultimately it's the one thing we should all learn. There they all are, with that club shaft in more or less the same position, same set of angles between all of them. Now, if they're all doing that, we as PGA professionals teaching the members of the club here should be obsessing about that position, how you get into it. And there's a lot of different ways of doing it, as Dechambeau and Furyk show. So there it is again. You can see now that club shaft at that angle, hands just in front of the feet or the toe line. That club shaft's just about to drop down on the inside a little more. Now he looks all quirky and gummed up again there, but that's just him. It's how he swings. He's got very long arms, very long levers, very, very athletic man. But a pretty orthodox hitting position for a good player because the body's turned out of the way. It just looks a bit peculiar with him because he stands so close to the ball. So what he's done there in that position, we can see the back of his buttocks there because he's moved himself this way to hit into the ball. You can see the back of his bum there. Now, if I set myself up a more normal or orthodox distance from the ball and made that position, then that looks about right. If I bring myself in close, it just looks a bit gummed up. The body's moved the same way. He's just got himself a little closer to the ball than most do. Now, from there, it doesn't get any more logical than that. You should just be able to see the ball there. It's just above the tree line. And his club shaft is driven on that very, very brief moment in time. They're driven towards the target. So there's a player who has all these quirks and all these big movements in the swing where he goes up, lengthens his swing by swinging back here dramatically from an upright position, comes into impact, and then does the most logical thing in the world, and that's swing the club head and the shaft down towards the target line. Next position, He's then swinging around his body. And so that's a very, very orthodox plane angle there for the club shaft and head to work through. So why do I say that? When we set ourselves up over the ball here, we tilt around, the body swings around here. Therefore, it's logical the hands and arms follow a very similar plane to that. There, as I swing through, I want the club shaft to be on that sort of plane there. That's very upright and will lead to a slice. That's very low and will lead to a hook. So as he swings and turns his body around, the club shaft stays on a more orthodox plane. So whilst his club went up on a very upright plane, it came down on an orthodox plane and swung through an orthodox plane. He has that big loop to lengthen his swing. And then about as classic a position as it's going to get in his follow through, very well balanced in his swing there. Hi Tristan, good morning to you. Didn't see you there. Alrighty, so if we look at that's the set of motion there of the world's straightest, most prolific hitter of greens and of fairways, or fairways and greens. I've got a couple of images here for you of his swing plane and his swing path being measured. So the yellow line is him scooping that club up in the air. Then his red line goes right behind him. And then if you look at the red line from about here, it just looks like a very simple swing plane, doesn't it? Same idea there. Red line up, yellow line down. Now, if we were to measure that in feet and inches, you can see why he does it. It just increases massively the length of this swing that he makes. Now, if I then go back to him at the top of his swing here, quite a significant bend in his left arm. But again, he doesn't care about that slight loss of swing arc from there because he increases the swing length anyway by doing that loop. And you will not get a more classically elegant use of the levers of the glove arm and the shaft of the club. You know how much I'm talking about the levers. Look at that. Absolutely fabulous. That glove arm, shaft of the club, right on line at impact. So why is that so important? It optimizes everything for a golf swing measured on Trackman. If I were to hit this way, I'm hitting down on the ball, which is a disaster for a driver for most amateur golfers. If I were to hit this way, the power's gone past my hands, there's nothing left in the tank. So if I hit the ball and I'm in that position there, I haven't optimized the power. Now, interestingly, I do my research on the stats today. So let me get them up here. And you've heard me talk all the time about the optimal way to strike a golf ball with a drive is to come smack it from underneath here. The average on Trackman for the Tour Pros is hitting down on the ball by 1 degree. Now, there's 2 reasons for that. The first reason is that they feel it makes them hit the ball a bit straighter. So when they're doing the measurements, they're trying to try and bomb the ball and hit the ball as far as possible. They'll peg it high and hit on the way up. If they've got a wide fairway and a long hole, they don't care about a left or right drive. If they're trying to hit the ball a little straighter, they'll hit down on the ball. Now, we can't do that because our club head speed won't allow us. If we hit down on a golf ball, how does it get airborne? Because as we hit down on it, it never really has a chance to have that trajectory. And so there are 3 things that make a golf ball fly and stay in the air. Number 1 are the dimples on the ball. Without the dimples, the ball just sort of falls out of the sky after 50 yards. The second is the loft angle, and that loft angle is dependent on how we swing. If we have 9 degrees of loft on the driver and put the ball forward in a stance and peg it high, that gives us the sort of 13 or 14 degrees of actual strike loft. Yep. If we hit down on the ball, that 9 degrees becomes 3 or 4 degrees strike loft, or what we call impact, a lofted impact. So if I hit down on the ball, then that 9 degrees becomes too little and I hit the ball too low, and therefore it affects the spin on the ball dramatically. So the big hitters, the bombers in the world, they'll take their driver and peg it down at 4 degrees of loft. So specially made drivers with no loft on it at all, but they'll set the tee peg very high, lean right back in here, get themselves behind it, and they'll take this more or less vertically straight face and launch the ball because they're leaning behind it so much. So that's how they optimize the physics in their swing. Now, if you and I were to hit down on our drivers, it'd be a disaster. Hit the ball too low, too much spin. And the other thing as well is, a golf ball, when it hits the face, wants to go somewhere. It doesn't just fly off the face. Now, if we hit down on it, that means it won't be able to ride up the face. It's got more chance of moving on the side of the face and hitting the ball less accurately. Now, interestingly, when we had the European Seniors Tour Pro-Am here 2 years ago, I put my Trackman on the 10th tee and got the players to hit balls from it. Some of them hated it, some of them loved it, and one very good player, prolific European Tour winner, came and hit a shot, hit a dreadful drive. He said, I was trying to improve, I'm trying to do my swing there so it suited Trackman, not the way I've played all my life. And so the way the pros hit the ball isn't always how we should hit it. Now, we know what's optimum for you because we work on Trackman and what have you, but what's optimum for the tour pros sometimes can be counterintuitive or counter-science, but they just do it their way. So that's where we get into the art of the game, the art of the swing. Okay, so if we then compare someone like Furyk, who uses his levers extremely efficiently and creates a widening, lengthening of his swing. Let's go back now and look at Bryson Dechambeau. And let's talk about that. So there he is at address. And there he is at the top. Really simple looking, efficient swing. And this all came about from a chap called Mo Norman, who I've mentioned to you before. And this is Mo Norman here. Now look at that. That must be one of the simplest, easiest to understand and logical ways to swing a golf club. But of course, only 2 or 3 people in history have ever done it. And the reason why I say it's so logical is that his spine and his arms are at 90 degrees to each other, or almost 90 degrees to each other. And his view is that his spine should stay there, and he should swing the club around his spine at that plane, on that plane. Now, in order to do that, he wanted to get rid of that angle there, stick his arms out there, so he stood miles away from the ball. Remember what I said about Furyk? He stood very close, and therefore had a huge impact on the arm plane. The reason why Furyk hits the ball so upright, or swings the club so upright, is that he stands so close to it. His left arm now is in a hanging position, vertical to the ground, and therefore it just goes up more or less in a vertical position. The further we stand from the ball, the more we flatten the plane around the body here. So Mo Norman stood with his hands extremely high up here, set that up as one single plane, and then just tried to swing around his spinal angle on that plane there. Now, he was enormously strong, Mo Norman, sort of abnormally strong. And you can see how strong his physique is. And then what he'd do, that's how he set up to the ball there. Now look where the club head is in relation to the ball. He viewed by taking that club head a foot behind the ball that it cut a foot of unnecessary movement out of the swing. That's how quirky he was. So a big tilt behind the ball as well. That ball's quite well forwards. And that was the limit of his backswing. Now, we can't teach that. We definitely cannot teach that as an action. It was just so unusual and so natural, but that's how he did it. And so what he'd do, he had his hands placed slightly far apart, so he didn't have them interlocking. He placed the club behind the ball, a foot behind it over here, like that, and he'd swing back and just take the club to there. From a plane angle, just to there. On that straight line. Now, Lee Trevino and Tiger Woods both say he's the best ball striker they've ever seen. So that's that. How can you argue with him if he's going to have that much acclaim? And as he came through the ball, that's how he looked. Now, it's worth typing in. I've said this to you before. It's well worth typing in and doing some study on Mo Norman. It's just fabulous to watch how people watching him stand in awe of his swing and his ball strike. Okay, so we then go back to the so scrambling. I talk about Rory McIlroy, so I'll make a little note here. Scrambling is whenever a pro misses a green, they make par or better. And McIlroy misses greens and scrambles or makes par or better 70% of the time. The average is 59% of the time. So putting it all together, McIlroy is the second longest driver in the world. He's the 180th straightest driver in the world, but he is the best scrambler in the world. So that's why he's exciting to watch. He's not popping it down the middle of fairways, hitting it on greens and taking 2 putts or 1 putt. He's actually moving the club around, moving the ball around the golf course in exciting ways. Alrighty, So if you've got any questions, type them in now. I'm going to talk a little bit more about swing playing here. So remember, Trackman's definition of swing playing is the vertical angle between the ground and the circle the club head travels on during the bottom portion of the swing. Okay, so when I swing on a path heavily from the inside there, 55, my swing plane is 47. My club path there is 5.5 from in to out, and my swing plane is 47. So that's a draw flight, a bit on that ball there. If I then do the opposite, try and hit a fade. So 5.5 my inside path there. I'm going to swing across the ball now. Not quite. Got that. Alrighty. Good question, Mel. Come back to that in a second. So my swing plane there stayed more or less the same with a club path at 11.5 degrees. Now the whole point of that there is that swing plane is one thing which is very easy to get very confused about, but really it's just part and parcel of understanding the science. Now when I'm swinging my club, I don't think about my swing plane as such. I'm trying to get the club to a position which I know optimizes swing plane. And if I go from here to here, that's a logical set of angles there to smack the back of the ball. It's not logical to do this followed by this. And that would really corrupt my swing plane. So even if I swing slight left or slight right of target there, I'm still coming at more or less the swing plane, the same swing plane to the ball. Now the big problem, Mel's just asked a question there. Have you seen good club players with a single plane swing? It seems the simplest but most unnatural. Well, in fairness, it should be the most natural, because that position there would be logical to swing on a sort of straight up and down line there to the ball. Unfortunately, Mel, we can't use any levers doing that. Or we certainly limit how we use the levers. Now, Furyk uses levers an awful lot. That's how we see all this sort of wobble in the swing. We create this lovely angle here to create club head power there. And if we put the club up there and try and swing it around us, we might hit the ball straight, we won't get power. And of course, the game is much easier the further that we hit it. There's a reason why all the best players in the club, the longest hitters that we see, don't swing on a single plane. Now, Bryson Dechambeau is incredibly unusual in as much that he has developed that swing plane. So, excuse me. He's developed that swing plane. Doug writes the science of it all. He loves the science of the game. He's developed that swing plane for himself, and it seems to work. Now, of course, his clubs are all the same length as well, or the irons are all the same length. And I'm not a fan of that at all. The big problem with that is that if the club is the same length, then you're going to have your wedge shots, and you're sort of swinging from up here. You're trying to play chip shots with a long club. It feels so ungainly. And if you think really, there's a reason why there's outliers in everything, obviously, and he's the outlier in the current game. But there's a reason why 99.9% of players over time, and the world's best players of time over time, have not employed that single plane swing. So, any other questions that you've got for me that you want to talk about? So, we'll take this picture, get out of the light, excuse me a second there. Now, this is where stuff starts getting interesting as well. Because if we look where Angel Cabrera's driver shaft is pointing there, it's what we call swinging across the line. So Cabrera has taken the club. If we take if we go back to the Mo Norman and the Bryson Dechambeau position of a single plane, the club swings around on this plane here. Across the line means the club now is off plane. Now the world's longest hitters typically are a little bit across the line because they swing the club a long way. Now the further I swing the twist around here, the more that club points right of target. So long swings do tend to be a little bit across the line here. So what's he got to do there? He either swings down on a very poor plane to the ball, or he'll swing from here and return back to plane. And so really, whenever we're talking about the swing plane, there's a variety of motions on the way back, and we can see that between the longest hitter in the world and the straightest, most regular hitter of greens in the world. There's a variety of ways we can swing the club up, but there's very few that we can swing on the way down. And so we have to stay on plane on the way down, which is more or less, as my Trackman's telling me there, is more or less at 45 degrees into the ball there. 45, 90, and 0. So if it's 45 degrees with the driver, and that optimizes with the driver, then that should be the plane of the swing. Now, Mel, you sent me the video of you swinging the other day in your garage. You stopped that video halfway down. You're not close to 45 degrees here. You're still up here. So you've got to do a lot of work now to get yourself up here and really shallow out. And what I want you to do is once you get to that position there, is extreme. Get yourself in an extreme position here. It won't be that extreme. Hand in front of the feet, club shaft behind you there. And that becomes the hitting plane. So Simon, here with pleasure, we'll do wedges next week. If you've got any questions about the wedges, send me an email between sessions, or anything particularly you want to work on with the wedges, be it distance control, or if it's the science of the wedges in here, then just let me know. How do you prioritize length of swing compared with positions in the swing for handicapped golfers? How do you prioritize length of swing compared to positions in the swing? Well, length and positions in the swing go hand in hand. You know, when it talks about Cabrera a moment ago, if he swings the club a very long way, the club gets out of position. So if he was to shorten his swing, it will get into a more orthodox position, but he doesn't need to because he doesn't want to. He knows that he can swing well from here. Mickelson's another one, very long swing, and of course the club crosses the line. Now, one session I will do for you is I'll show you all the quirks of all the tour pros, all the differences in their swings and how they all sort of get to a variety of different positions. And this is remarkable. They all do it so differently. And God bless them, because they've got all the access to cameras, they've got all the access to Trackman and what have you, and science, and all the world's best coaches, the most analytical, scientific coaches, but they all still swing the same way. So in answer to your question, Mel, you've got to find your way of doing it. And if you want to prioritize that, if you want to create more length in the swing, then you've got to ask yourself why you want to do that. If you're stiff and short here, then you're not using your levers. If you're a bit too long, then you get the club out of position. And really, if we all try to swing to a more orthodox position up here, from a set of orthodox positions down here, then it should improve the game, because as Trackman tells us, the club's swinging up and down on a more efficient path into the ball anyway. And there is only one path into the ball. That's just gently from the inside there, 4 or 5 degrees of the driver. Alrighty, any more questions? I'll give you a minute. Any more questions? And while you're doing that, I just want to show you another picture which I've got here. If we say Dechambeau there is the longest hitter in the world, with his hands a long way from his body. And here's one of my favourite ever photographs in golf. He's a 400-yard hitter of the ball. And look how far his hands arms are away from his body. So what he's doing there is really utilising and extending his levers. So as he's hit that ball there, as he's bombed into it, he's in that position there, hands and arms a long way from the body, left arm shaft of the club in that powerful position of completely releasing the lever. Think of the hammer thrower. They throw, and that the levers, the arms, and the weight of the ball, the chain it's on, would throw at that angle there. Same in a golf swing. As he throws the club down, moves his body out of the way, everything gets super extended out here. Now going back to Charlotte, I was talking about before, if Charlotte bends her arm to here, as many good players do, but kept it bent, she would top the ball. But the lever handicapper never tops the ball. So it's up here with a bend, but it's straight down here at the moment of impact. And again, the ultimate bomber here, the 400-yard driver, look at that. No bend in the arms there. It just wouldn't be efficient for power. Alrighty. Any more questions about what we talked about today? About the plane of the swing? Talked about Bryson Dechambeau. If there's one image I want you to take away today, it's probably that one there. Yellow line up, red line back. And that looks really peculiar until you take away all that there. And then you just see that red line. It's not quite 45 degrees there. But if you look down, if you do the line from the golf ball up on this line here, that's probably not a million miles off 45 degrees, is it? And really, if you can try and do one thing in your swing, it'd be to set an image that when we tilt forwards here, that's to create a 45-degree arc around the body with the club head. And I'll tell you, you'll not go far wrong if you make that 45-degree arc. The tour professionals, when they come down to the ball, it's less than 40. If that's 45, they're more than 30 down here. But for most amateur golfers, if you got yourself at 45 degrees, swinging around the body, you're going to do absolutely fine. Alrighty, well, thank you very much for tuning in. If you've got no more questions for me, then we'll call it a day there. I've got an event, I've got doing a session now for the On-Course Foundation, soldiers out there. So thank you very much for your time. And let's look forward to Boris tomorrow night. There's so much conflicting information on tomorrow night. But I think all the leaks seem to point to the end of the month, don't they? And I think hopefully he'll say, you know, on Monday you've got a week's notice. But I do think it's going to be end of May, sadly, which is a real shame for us all. But in the meantime, I hope you keep well, and I look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mel. I look forward to seeing you on the golf course soon. And you will not believe the condition of it. It's absolutely, it's glorious, like a carpet. Absolutely fantastic. We've been spoiled rotten. My pleasure. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Charlotta. I wasn't picking on you, honestly. Yeah, absolutely right, Helen. Sooner rather than later. Well, God bless you all. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. All the best.